Alright everybody, today we're going to do a wheel bearing on an 04 Kia Rio Cinco. This station wagon version of the Kia Rio. So this is one of them bearings that's attached to the hub. You'll understand here in a minute. So we need to get this cover off. We've already got it jacked up. See, we got it jacked up. So let's go ahead and get this cap popped off. Alright. Show you the inside of this cap. That arrow right there, there's usually a flat right here on your rim. That's where that goes. I know a lot of people put those on wrong, but that's where your cap lines up to your wheel. Let's see, is it 22? Nope, 22 is too big. There's the 21 millimeter socket. Get this tire off. Goes in our cap. Get our tire off. Alright. We recently did brakes on this car. That's why you see that D right there. I gotta find my Phillips bit. I need to get them screws out. Let me go grab my Phillips bit. I'll be right with you. Alright, now we can get moving. Take our screws out of our rotor. Have to do that first. We're going to just take the whole thing off. So there's two 17 millimeter bolts in the back. We're going to take those off and we're going to hang it up here on this strut. I might. So, let's get our 17 back in there. Get this bolt up here. Now these should come loose because I just recently did a brake job on this car. So, I'll go ahead and we'll buzz those out real quick. And get the brakes pulled, and then we can go after that center nut. Hold your caliper up so it doesn't fall on the ground. And you let this bottom bolt out. Because otherwise your caliper is going to hit the dirt, and you don't want that. So, put our hook in. Set it up here on this shock tower there like that. Try not to crimp your hoses. Set it over like that. I don't know, maybe we'll move it down a hook. Give it some slack. That way we don't tear up our brake hose. There we go. Now we're ready. Get our hub rotor off. We're in park, so we're not going to be rolling this very well. So we're going to leave it in park. We got to get this center nut loose. And just like most cars, it's got a notch down here. You got to put your, I got to go get my hammer. To pop that space out real quick. And then we can get this nut off. This nut is not reusable, so make sure you have a replacement nut with your hub bearing or your hub. If you're going to reuse your old hub, make sure when you get your bearing and everything that you get a new nut. So, let's find out what size that is and get that broke loose. The hub socket, 29 millimeter. Alright. Get that on there and get that nut broke off. Didn't have it on the right setting. There we go. Had it on wussy setting. Had to put it on beat your ball setting. Alright, we got this tool here that we borrowed from the O'Reilly, not a sponsor. And the theory behind this tool is that center right there lines up with this right here. And you use a couple of your lug nuts. And you get this tightened down here like this. And the theory is it's supposed to pull the hub out of the spindle. I've never used one of these, so this is a first for me. Put our lug nuts on. Then you want to put them on backwards. That way it holds on best. If they'll go on backwards. Nope. Run them down till they can't go any further. And then what'll happen is it'll, there we go, like that. We got another nut goes on this side. Try to get the same amount of threads on each side. That way you have equal pulling. Well, we're going to be a little off on this one, but I think we'll be okay. There we go. Crank this out till it stops. It's going to push the, it's going to start off by pushing the axle shaft back into the car, but then after that happens, it's going to start to pull that hub bearing out. And I think it's going to be a 21 on that. Nope, that's a 19. I do have a 19 that's in my impact set, so I'll be right back and go get that real quick. Alright, move my knee out of the way so you guys can see what we're doing. Yep, 19 millimeter. Take it nice and slow. Get our gun on it here and we'll go nice and slow with it. There it is. Let's see what we have here, since I've never done one of these before. Alright. That's what we have here. Yeah. Let's check our race. Race looks good. Oh, okay. We have a double bearing. It's the back bearing that failed. Front bearing feels fine. So we're going to need a back bearing. Alright. So, here's the next question. How do we get that back bearing out? We're going to change the front bearing too. That's going to be part of the setup. But we got a back bearing that we got to deal with though. Because see, that back bearing's got so much slop in it that's why it's grinding. That back bearing's toasted. Alright, so let's see. What do we got to do to get to that back bearing? We got to... let's see. We don't want to take that control arm loose. We'll never get it back on. Pull the tie rod end. That way we can rotate the spindle. And then we can get the axle shaft out. And see how we go about getting that bearing out the back. Let's see if we can get that nut broke loose. There's our tie rod end nut. Put that back on later. Smack this real quick. It's coming up. There it is. Take our nut off. Move our tie rod end to the side. And we can rotate this wheel, see? Let's see. We can rotate this wheel. We gotta get this this axle shaft out of here. Let's see, how are we gonna do that? We're gonna have to move our brake caliper. Let's see, where are we gonna move it to? Down here. And we gotta get enough rotation on this so we can get this pushed out. Oh, it wants me to pull the knuckle. Anyway, we can pull the ball joint on it. Nut right there and a nut right there. Let's see what size that is. It's going to be probably a 17. Yep, it's a 17. Let me get my ratchet on it here. Alright. Go ahead and get a wrench on the other side. Pop this nut through. I'll drop this ball joint down. I've never had this ball joint out, so I don't know how that's going to go. I need to pop this bolt through. So we'll take our there's our bolt and washer, or bolt nut there. And we got to pop that out, so that means we're going to have to not break things. Now that ball joint's shot. Nothing new though. Let me get my pry bar in there. See if we can get our hub, our drive axle out of there, and we can go after that hub bearing. That's as far back as it goes. Boy, they got some real tight quarters in here. All right, I gotta go get my splitter, so I'll be right back. All right, I went in there with the pickle fork. I'll show you what I did. Went in there like this. Didn't even have to put too much pressure on it, it dropped. So we got it to come down now. What kind of ball joint is this? Oh. This is an integrated ball joint. It's part of the lower control arm. That's a strange design. I decided to go a different route with this, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. We're getting these bolts out. Alright, you can hear my air compressor in the background. I ended up having to cut the nut on the bottom bolt. Top bolt came right out, but we're going to get new hardware. So now we're going to take our pry bar here and we're going to pry this off the shock like that. We're going to take our caliper back off that we put on here. Hang our caliper back up on our shock pad as soon as I find my hook. Hang that off of there like that, and then we can get this spindle off of here, which we got to get back off of our ball joint. It got stuck to our ball joint again, so we got to get it unstuck from our ball joint again. So, despite my efforts not to, and see our ball joint boot's tore, so we're going to have to get a ball joint boot or get a new ball joint, but that's another day. There's our spindle. Looks like we have the same type of bearing in the back that we do in the front, but look at this. So we got a problem here. There's our rubber off our back seal right there, so that's probably why it's rocking around like that. So let's go to the bench. All right, we're on the bench. Now this bearing here is not pressed in because you can move it around inside the bore. It's only being held in by the remains of the back seal, so I'm assuming we can take our screwdriver like this and beat this out the back. So that's what we're going to try to do. And excuse the moving around on there. Actually, let's flip this over. Go ahead and get our bearing seal out. Let me go get my seal puller. I'll be right back. Alright, let's try this again. Got my seal puller right here, so we're going to see if we can grab a bit of this seal here and try to rip it out. If it will come out. Let's try doing it this way. That way we're pulling and not pushing. Oh my Lord. Oh my goodness me. This seal is like sealed lock in there. Normally I don't have a problem getting the wheel seals out, but this one's being a real pain. Wants to stay on that side right there, so. Oh my Lord. Alright, we're gonna have to resort to plan B. I don't know what that is, so we're gonna make it up as we go. Alright, that seal is jammed solid in there. Let's try to free it up. Alright. Let me find something big and round to stuff down in there, like maybe a socket. We're going to try to bust that through the 36 millimeter socket. Alright, we're going to drive this thing through the backside. Kind of hang on to yourself a little bit. It's going to get rough. Okay, well that was counterproductive. We got our bearing out. That's part of the job. But our seal's still in there. So let me see. We're going to have to get creative on getting that seal out because that seal does not want to come out. this. I don't want to hold it like that either, because I learned from the last time I did that. Ripped my wrist open. Ah! Just don't want to come apart. Ah! Goodness me. There it is. I'll tell you what, I have never in my life had a seal so rough in my life. Didn't even hurt myself. See that? A little scratch, a little red, not too bad. Better than it could have been. All right, let's get a rag and wipe this out. Get some brake clean. We'll clean this out real quick. Then I'm gonna go to the parts store and we're gonna pick up some seals and some bearings. We're gonna get the spindle done. We gotta get the front bearing off of the hub because I need to see if that piece on the hub is either part of the hub or part of the bearing. I'm not sure which. Got to do that too. So hang on just a second and I'll be right back. And let's get this cleaned up real quick. Normally your bearings don't, you know. Now at this point, because these are roller bearings and not sealed bearings, and you have races in here, I'll show you here in a minute. See that? You got races in here. Unless the races are pitted, which these are not, these are actually in good shape. It's not recommended that you change the race. The only time you want to change the race on a system like this is if you've got pitting or rust or damage to the race itself. Then you want to get you a cutting tool to kind of slice it down the end here, and then an air hammer drives it out with a chisel bit. But if your bearing races look good and all your bearings are bad, see this bearing's toasted. This thing is just rolling all over the place. Then you just want to go through and replace the bearing itself. So this part's ready to go. We'll set our spindle off to the side. Let's go get our hub and pull that hub apart. I'm putting new hubs on the car for obvious reasons, so I'm not too concerned with anything as this hub bearing here. I'm just more concerned about, well, right now trying to get my tool off of here, first of all. That's how you disengage the tool. Then you can get your lug nuts off of it. Now you're not going to need this to reinstall. And then when you go to tighten up your axle nut, that'll do the rest of it for you. So make sure that if you get a new hub that it comes with a new axle nut. There's that tool. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put our bearing separator in here, and we're going to pull this bearing off of this hub bearing, or off the hub, and we're going to find out if we're going to have a problem or not, because some of these have a collar on them. So, some of these hubs they have a collar pressed onto them that you have to reuse. All right, there is a ring. It's on the front side of this bearing. You got to get that ring off. That's what that ring looks like. You need this for your hub bearing. All right, so normally what we would do in this situation is we would go ahead and bearing press this puppy off of there. Because see, what we would do is we would get this underneath the bearing instead of the bearing cap. And probably could still do it and show it to you here. Let me get it up underneath the bearing. The seal comes off on its own, so we're not worried about that. We just want to get underneath the bearing. If we were reusing this hub bearing, which we're not, this is how you would go about doing it. Get it right up underneath the bearing. Get your nuts put back on. And then put your tool together like this and just drive it forward like this. Rotate it. Do the same thing on the other side, just like this. Now we have nothing to press against here, so we're going to put something there to press against. I'm going to show you how this works. Alright, we got to get our center. I just had it. Set our center in there right there like that. Put your center piece together like this. And let's see, we need to get you back in frame here so you can see what we're doing here. Slide that in like that, and then you want to attach this to the bearing face, or the bearing tool here. Sometimes it's easier to do this and then put the cross piece on. As you can see, our bearing tool is a little bit on the bent side because we kind of bent it earlier. Didn't mean to, it just kind of happened that way. Maybe we can straighten it out. And we got to center that up inside the chuck, tighten those down. And we got our bearing tool here. We don't have a, in some of these kits they have a piece that goes on the end here that you can use as a driver. But we'll be alright. We're going to get us a 2x4. And that's going to be our pressing surface. So let me grab that and I'll be right back. Got our block of wood stuffed in there. Make sure that we're all nice and tight, and we'll drive that down on there. I found a brake pad. Coincidentally, it's the brake pad off this car. There we go. Now we should be able to pull that bearing up. Let's just give it some turns until it goes pop. Just nice and easy. I think it's coming up. I can feel it. Yep, it's moving. It's moving. We're almost off. Yeah, it's getting hard to pull. Alright, that's because we're up against our block of wood, so we got to pull our wood out. Alright, we'll pull that block of wood out. Look, there's our bearing. It's almost completely off the car. Alright, so what we need to do now is we need to get us a small socket that we can use so that we can still do pulling on it. We're going to use our old nut since we can't use it anymore anyway. Set that down inside our press. We'll zip this back down on top of it and we'll pull that bearing up. That should do the job. Yep, I think that'll work. Alright, let's pull that bearing up. Here it comes. Alright, let's pull our press back off. Let's see how far up the bearing is. Pull our socket. Look at that. It's almost off. Now we need to find something smaller to fit inside that space. Alright, 24mm socket goes down into the hub. We'll back this up so we can get our brake pad back in so we got our pressing surface. And we will finish pressing this bearing off this hub. Alright, there it is. You heard it pop, folks. That's all it needed, was just a little bit extra go. And there's our bearing. Let's go ahead and pull our tool off of here. See, there's our bearing. There's your bearing, slightly beat, but is it the same as the front one? Yep, they're both the same. So you need 2 of those. And I'll have a part number for you when I get back. I got to go to the parts store now, pick up those parts now that I know what we're dealing with. You want to take your bearing press off your hub if you're going to save it. One thing you want to make note of is pay attention to how tight you get your press. This is actually a ball joint or a bearing separator. But a lot of people, you see them on the YouTube, they use a big ass press with a jack on it and everything, and they put that in there and they pump, pops off. You don't need none of that. Just did it with a bearing separator. That's what that's for. That's the purpose behind that tool. Then your seal comes off. See, there's your seal. And this is what your hub looks like when you got it all back taken apart. Pretty neat, isn't it? Alright, so I'm going to go grab some parts and I'll be right back. Okay, I apologize for it being dark out. I was going to use a new hub assembly. Unfortunately, the idiots at the local parts store can't get me one for like 2 days, and I got to have this car done tonight. So we're going to use the old one. It's got some nicks in it. See, we got a cut right there from the last guy that did this, and we got another nice little gouge in it right here. So it'll be fine. It's just the next time that we do this, I'll have everything prepared ahead of time. So, all right, so we got 2 wheel seals we got to use. This one here, the 4990. See, that's your 4990. That one goes in the back of the spindle. The one that we need for the hub is 710-323. Looks like this, okay? Set your seal down right on that right there. There's a spot on the end of the hub, a little bit bigger than the rest of it. That is what that's for, okay? We got our bearings. Your bearings in A18. So we're going to grease these. We're not going to worry about changing out the races because, like I said earlier, our races are fine. So we need to get these bearings out. We're going to save the races though in case we need them for something else. So here's your bearing, brand new bearing. That is going to be pressed down on there. And then, let's see, we need to grease this first. So I need to go grab me some bearing grease. I shall return. All right, I got my gloves on because I hate doing this thing without gloves. Got our red grease. This is the tacky grease. You can use black grease if you have it, or brown grease, or gray grease. Wheel bearing grease works well. This is all-purpose heavy-duty grease because I really don't want to do this again. For a while anyway. So take your grease and we're going to just, you can do the scrape method if you prefer, and I do that too. So, you know, get our grease on here nice and heavy duty here. And of course, we're going to put a lot of grease inside the spindle too, so that it's got plenty to live on for a while. Alright, so we got our bearing all nice and greased up. Now we're going to put some grease on our hub. And the reason that we're doing that is to aid in installation, because we're going to have to beat this thing down on there. We don't have a press, and as much as I'd love to use my bearing separator to press this back on by putting it in reverse mode, I honestly don't believe that I could do that. Alright, so we got our wheel seal on first. Make sure that's set down on there. Then you're going to take your block of wood that you used earlier, and you're going to place it on top of your bearing to use as a beat down surface. And then we're going to take our glove off. I got more gloves, so, you know, don't worry about, you know, we're running out of gloves. Only need one hand free anyway, so we're going to set it like that, and then we're going to drive this down on there with our hammer. It's going crooked, so we got to... See that? Now we got it down about as far as we can get with our hammer, so now we're going to have to get a socket that's just as big around as the inside of that bearing. We're going to beat on the inside of the bearing. And usually these don't take much to get down. It's just hard to do it in the dark, especially when I'm trying to locate my stuff here. I don't know what I dropped on the ground. Oh, okay, I dropped a lug nut on the ground. That's probably not a good idea. We'll set our bearing over here, or our bearing grease over there. All right, and we want to kind of add some... I hope you can see this, because, you know, I understand it's hard to see. All right, so now we want to get something to go around the outside of our bearing. So let me see. Let's see. That won't work. Alright, let me see if I have something else I could use. No, that won't work either. I have an idea. I'll be right back. Alright, so I got our bearing pressed on. I'll tell you how I did it. It's really actually a genius idea. Alright, so if you have regular cinder blocks, the tall blocks like maybe you used to build a wall out of, get you one of those. Alright, then you're going to have to get you 1 1/8 inch socket. Drive it down enough to where you're right past this lip right here. And then grab your bearing separator. Make sure you leave it open to where it will float, okay? To where it'll sit like that on top of the bearing, okay? Now we could probably drive it further down this way. All right, well anyway, you want to take your bearing separator, you want to leave it open, and you want to lay it down flat on top of the cinder block. Then take your hub face up, which is the side where the lug nuts are. Take your 2x4, put it sideways on top of the hub. That way it's in between the lug nuts or the studs. Use that as your beating surface and just hammer this thing down. If you got enough grease on it, you'll be fine. We got a little bit left to go on here, so we're going to take our 2-inch piece of pipe and we're going to grab our 2x4 that we used a minute ago. We're going to set our 2x4 on top of our pipe here, and we're going to finish driving this down because we got a little bit left to go on it. But I wanted to tighten up this separator tool so that it's a little bit more square around the bearing. And I got to find my hammer and we can start beating this down. All right, this is the only part about working at night is it gets really dark around here. So, all right, then you take your board and you're going to smack this down some more. That should be good enough. Yep, whatever we don't get here, we'll get when we press it back into the spindle, because we're going to have to press this back into the spindle when we get the spindle done. So we'll take our bearing tool off. See, and it didn't harm the threads at all, or the bearing's still good, the hub's still good. We got a little bit of a gap between here and our bearing, but that'll be because we got to put this back on the car. So when we put it back on the car and we tighten the nut up, it'll draw it all in. So don't worry about it. If you can get it all the way down to the end where it's sitting inside that seal, then go for it. But if you can't, get it as close as you can, okay? Grease the living crap out of that. That is the only way you're going to make that thing function the way you want it to. All right, so now we got to set this to the side because we're ready to put that back together. And we got to get our spindle. So our spindle, we got to find the front. This is the front. All right, so now we got to go to the back. All right. I got to put a new pair of gloves on because we got to grease up our back bearing. This time we're going to add grease to the inside of the spindle because we're going to put the seal back in. So we're going to need our seal driver, which I have sitting over here on the side. We're going to need our seal driver, and we're going to need, let's see, we don't need to beat this one in. This one will just drop in. See, this one's a drop in. See, so all we got to do is drop it down in after we grease it. Kind of like a truck bearing. If you've ever done truck bearings, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've never done a truck bearings are set up a lot like this car bearing is, except you don't have to press one side in. Now that is only true part of the time, because I know of some 4x4s you have to press the bearing in on the hub on the 4-wheel drives. But the 2-wheel drives that I normally work on, you don't have to press bearings in it. So get our gloves on here. We got to grease up this bearing. We'll put some grease inside the race. We'll drop it down inside there, and then we'll get our seal installer and we'll put our back seal in here. Then we'll put this back on the car, and then we will put the hub into the spindle on the car. We'll use our impact and we'll drive that puppy home using our nut that I have to reuse. Normally you don't reuse those nuts because they're called crush nuts for a reason. But there are a few situations where as long as you can get the notch to line back up, you can punch it back into the hub and you'll be into the axle and you'll be fine. So let me turn this so you can see what we're going to do here. All right. I know it's a bit of a job trying to film in the dark, but show must go on, as they say. All right, so we're going to grab some bearing grease. This big old glob of it works fine. Yeah, I prefer using gloves when I do this because I don't really like the feel of this stuff. And of course you want to get as much in there as you can. What I usually do is I'll roll it like that, and then I'll drag my hand across the edge there, because the same thing as if you were dragging it across the palm of your hand like a lot of places do. If you have a bearing greaser, that works even better, but you know, that's next on the purchase list. I'm going to take some grease grease it up real good on the inside of this spindle, because it could be a long time before you're back in here again. You want to get it nice and greased up best you can. Try not to put any grease or dirt in your grease. And if you get some grease where the seal sits, that's perfectly fine. Alright, and then we want to, of course, we want to put some, oh, we got to put that sleeve back on that too before we go too much further with that part. Set your bearing down in there, and then we're going to go ahead and take our gloves back off, at least one of them. Try not to make a mess everywhere. I use up more gloves doing this job than any other job on the planet. Alright, close up our grease and set our grease to the back. You got to set your spindle down flat. Now we need to get our installer. So let's see. This seal, it's a lip seal. This lip faces back. So it's going to sit like this inside the spindle. We have chosen to use the 72mm. Fits like that. The good thing about wheel seals is they don't take much to get put down in there, so I'll probably put a couple taps on this and it'll already be inside the spindle where it needs to be. So get our spindle tool ready here. Get our driver ready. Pull the other glove off. Alright, and then we'll take our hammer and we'll just kind of gently tap our seal in place. It's just about in. We got to get this corner over here. Wants to be a pain. Got our seal installed. I prefer to use the other bench because it's flatter than this one. Even though they're both pallet benches, one of them's better at certain things than the other one is. Alright, so we got to get our collar back on our spindle, or back on our hub. This little puck right here, we got to get him put back on, because he's actually a spacer. He's important. He has to be here. So let's get our hub back over here and drop our spacer down on there like that. We're going to grease that up some more before we put it back on, so don't worry too much about that. So we're going to head to the car, so I'll see you when we get there. Alright, now we got to put it all back together again. So got my light up here so you guys can see. I went and bought some new hardware, because what you didn't see was lower bolt didn't want to come out, so I had to cut the nut off. So I'll show you the nut. And you can't see it too well. I'll put it over here so you can see better. Yeah, I cut the top off the nut and then it finally wanted to spin. So I went to the local hardware store. So anyway, I went to the hardware store and I got 2 new bolts for the top there. That's these ones right here. M12 by 1.5, and so that's how it's going to look when we get it in there. We're going to have a flat washer on both sides, and then because you get new hardware every time I do a job like this, well, if it's rusty you do, I got another bolt for the ball joint. So let's get our spindle attached to the car. Then we will go get our hub and we'll grease this in here, get it all nice and greased up, and then we'll put our hub back in. So let's see, this goes like this. So we got to put our ball joint down in here like that, and then we got to pinch your fingers as you get your. See, because you can pull down. You got leverage now, so you can pull down. You got to get your axle inside your spindle like that. And then we can push this down. See, we can push this down now. See, push this down. Get our bolts installed. At least get the top one in. Alright, so we're going to need a crowbar. So I've got one right here. You got to get that down where you can get your bolt started. Let me see if I can get this thing to go sideways. Let's see. There we go. Hold your bolt in place. You stuff your bolt through the hole. There we go. And we can pull our... There we go. There's the top bolt. Like I said, don't tighten this up until you get the bottom bolt in, and then you can tighten it all up. I'm going to wait till I got it all together and then go through and tighten them up all at once. So, let's get our other bolt. Goes in the bottom hole. Gotta get this in the bottom hole now, so we gotta rock it back and forth until it lines up. Sometimes you gotta take your crowbar that you use to put this together, and you gotta stick it through one side to line up the hole, and then you can pull it out as you drive your piece through. So I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here as soon as I find my crowbar. So what you do is take your crowbar, and if you can get it in one side, see how it's got a alignment on the end of it? Take that and you just line it up through the hole like that, right? Then you can feed your bolt through the other side. And if it works, which it tried to, sometimes you gotta smack it a little bit. Alright. That side's not lining up, so we're gonna have to come over here and we're gonna have to line it up. You gotta line it up. And then you can stick your bolt through it. Perhaps. Oh, it's off just a little bit. I don't know how the hell that happened. There we go. Just push on it. But, you know, if you need to do the other things, you could do those too. Put our nut back on. Grab our light bulb from sliding off our car. Tell you, these springs, they become a go-to place to hang stuff from. That's got some junk on it, so we're gonna have to just kind of grab our socket. I think these are 17s. Nope, these are 19s. We gotta grab our 19mm wrench out of our toolbox. I'm gonna have to turn them a little bit till they get past the crap, and they'll spin right back on there. So. See, the reason I'm going to wait to tighten this all up till I'm done is because we got this brake caliper we got to deal with. So if I can get the bolts in, then I'll go around after I get the rest of the car back together, and I'll just go through and tighten everything up. So, all right, we got to get our bolts through our ball joint. So that's just a regular bolt, no nuts. I mean, there is a nut, but there's no washers on it. Try to remember which way the old one went. Well, right now I'm telling you it's wrong. The bolt always goes facing the front of the car. The nut goes on the front. It's usually a rule of thumb when it comes to these ball joints. Make sure she's sitting nice and solid in there. Of course, if she's not, the bolt won't go through. This little trick, you learn doing this enough times. All right, we got to hook our tie rod end back up. Now, we never turned it, so it should be fine. So we'll just roll that back over there, sit that back down in there like that, and then we can tighten up our nut on our tie rod end, like that. That's a nylock nut, and you're supposed to, as a rule, you're supposed to use a new nylock nut every time you break that loose. But I've seen those nylock nuts last thousands and thousands of revolutions moving up and down, so I don't think you got nothing to worry about there. So next thing we got to do, I got to go get our spindle, or our hub. I got to slide our hub onto here. We're going to grease the living daylights out of all this in here. We're going to put so much grease in here that this car won't know what to do with it all. We're going to clean off our threads a little bit on our shaft here, so that when we put it on there, we don't, because we did some cutting earlier, metal shavings got on there. I don't want any metal shavings getting inside that hub causing problems. So let me go grab the rest of our parts and we'll finish this up. All right, we're ready. I am so sorry. I just checked my camera and noticed that you guys had a hell of a glare on you. So sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I will try harder next time, I promise. All right, so we got our axle shaft cleaned up. Gotta get some gloves on because we're about to go on a greasing spree. We're gonna put as much bearing grease inside that opening as we can humanly fit, because this thing is going to have to ride on that for another 50,000-60,000 miles. Now, I was looking at the old parts. This bearing has been changed before. That's why there's gouges in the spindle. That's the reason why I didn't want to reuse this hub, because those gouges. But I don't want to wait 2 days to get another hub, so we're going to have to do is what we got. It's what we do at Ranger Auto. We do is what we got, but we try to improve on it whenever possible. So, you know, you got that going for you too. All right, so I moved the light down so you could see better what we're doing here, and so I can see what we're doing here. So we're going to take some grease, and we're going to jam it down inside here. We're also going to put a whole bunch on the end of, see, we got to put a lot of grease in here. Cover this thing as much as you can in bearing grease. And then what you don't fit in there, put on your hub assembly. See, we got to put all that on there. Grease that all back up again. See how that works? And then you're going to take your hub and you're going to line up your splines, and you're going to press your hub into, right onto that part. Now I'm going to show you where the bolt part comes in, because now we're going to get our bolt. I'm going to hang this back up so we can continue working here. All right, so we got to get our hub bearing installed. So we're going to take our nut, we're going to press this in, we're going to get some thread started on this. This was a 29 millimeter, so we got to take our impact and we're going to drive that down, and we're going to watch the back. When you can't see the seal, then it's in all the way. So it might take a little bit to get it there, but we will get it there. All right, let's get this thing drove home. Got my 29 millimeter socket right here for my nut. We got it about as tight as it's going to go for right now. We got our battery gun here set to nuclear, and I'm going to just watch it on the back side as I press this down on there. So here we go. sure that we got it in all the way. All right, and then we gotta, it's in park, so you're not gonna get much movement. We're checking to make sure it didn't bind. Looks like it's fine, so we can go ahead and drive our bolt home for good this time. Looks good to me. Yep, we sealed. We're good to go. All right, so you're gonna take your screwdriver. Doesn't have to be as long as this one is. And you're gonna find your corner right there where your axle shaft goes in. And you're gonna take your hammer and you're gonna punch this back in place. Okay, so I went and grabbed my car keys, put the car in neutral. I got the parking brake set and I got it blocked, so it's not going anywhere. So we're gonna rotate our axle now. Oh, this feels nice and tight now. There's where we gotta hit it right there. So we're gonna take our screwdriver and we're gonna aim down from the top. And we're going to make sure that our groove's right there. Tighten that down. See that? Smashed it right down like it's supposed to be. Alright. You want to roll this back and forth a little bit. Get your grease worked in. It's going to be a little tight to move because it's a brand new bearing. A lot of it has to do with your transmission too. So you want to roll it around. You want to feel for any kind of crunchies. Roll it forward because it does spend most of its time going forward. And we'll roll it backward. And just kind of roll it around a little bit. And we'll set our axle up. Oh, we want to. Feels good. All right. Before we get our, we got to get our bolts tightened up now. So that bottom one's an M10, so that's going to be 17 millimeter. So you want to get a, want to make sure you got your 17 millimeter socket nearby, which I do somewhere. That's 19. 5/8, that don't even be out here. There's our 17. We'll put that down on the back side here for this ball joint. And put our wrench on the other side. We'll set our gun to low. You don't need to blow this apart. Actually, what we can do is we'll do it this way. We got our 17 right here for our zip gun. All we need is like a 3-inch extension to get it back in there, and we can tighten it up with our zip gun. And I have a 3-inch extension right here. Isn't that convenient? Alright. So I did my best to keep the car all 17 millimeter like it was when we started. The only difference is those two bolts right there. Alright, and we'll take our other ratchet here and we'll tighten it down, make sure that it's nice and tight. Now you should have a backing plate right here, but if you don't, it's fine. All it does is keep garbage off your brakes. Alright, tighten that down. Let's see, that's a 19, so that's going to be our big gun. So let's get our 19 millimeter here. Get our big gun right here. Turn it on low because it's only a tie rod end. You don't have to go balls to the wall with it. Just one works fine. Just put it up here on this bolt right here and set it to forward. must be spinning. Yep, it must be spinning. So we're gonna have to put some pressure on that to hold it down while we tighten it down, because otherwise it's not gonna tighten down. There's that. All right, and we'll get the rotor on, then we'll get these 2 bolts. So let's get our rotor installed. Find your holes for your screws. They go this way now. Get your 2 Phillips screws. So it was at that point in the video I was getting a brake rotor put on that my phone decided to tell me it was out of memory. So I wasn't able to record the rest of the reinstallation. But I went through and tightened everything up. And I had to break the caliper apart from the bracket because I had to push the brake pedal, which means that, of course, the brakes had to be pushed back. So I got that done, took it out for a drive, runs fine. So I'm hopeful that you found this video useful. And I noticed there weren't very many Kia videos out there that addressed this issue. So if you like it, go ahead and let me know, and we'll see you on the next one.